Good. So my name is Charlotte Opal. I'm the executive director of the Forest Conservation Fund, who is hosting this webinar. Thanks, Rainey. And the Forest Conservation Fund is a Swiss-based nonprofit. We work with conservation projects led by Indigenous people. Oh, sorry, Rainey, can you go back 2 slides? Yeah, just to me for now. Um, we work with Indigenous people and local communities who are protecting their rainforest homes, and we connect them to usually companies or other donors, individuals who want to support them in their conservation project. It could be companies that are buying raw materials in the landscape that are driving deforestation, so cocoa, coffee, palm oil, timber, soy, etc. It could be companies that donors that want to support human rights and indigenous land rights or biodiversity and carbon protection. Lots of good reasons to protect forests. And basically what we do is we bring the projects into our portfolio, and then we try to find them funding from donors. And we really make that connection. We do the due diligence, we do deforestation monitoring. And now you can go to the next slide. We have 12 projects in 5 countries right now. And we're scoping others. Those are the projects in gray, are the ones we're scoping. So always looking for new projects and new funding for projects on the frontiers of deforestation in the tropics. These are our funders. We were founded in 2020, and we've distributed over about $1.5 million to projects around the world. So that's us, Forest Conservation Fund. At the end, we'll encourage you to sign up for our newsletter and everything if you want to follow us. But now, why are we having this webinar? If you can go to the next slide, Rini. So like I said, we're working with forest-based communities who have decided to protect areas of forest, and they need financing for patrols and signage and customary education and conservation activities. And so in many countries, we're working with community managed forests under different regimes, different zoning. And this is an example from Indonesia, social forestry, it's called. And the way the forest is zoned is there's a strict protection area, and then there's an area where communities were intended to use the forest in the way that they always have. So communities, and that's certainly something that we believe in, collecting non-timber forest products, collecting food and medicine and firewood and wood for their houses and boats and things. But in some countries, so Indonesia is a good case, the law allows the communities to plant other crops inside the forest. So agroforestry crops, so it could be coffee, it could be cocoa, it could be acai, it could be other things. And so that's legally allowed, and it's called agroforestry. We love agroforestry as a concept on farms, but it could be a threat to the quality of the forest if it happens a lot. So we're thinking about, okay, what do we do in this scenario? We want the communities to have forest-friendly livelihoods. We want the wildlife and the habitat to be intact. How do we balance these needs? So we pulled together today this amazing panel, if you can go to the next slide, of experts and practitioners in the topic of agroforestry, linked to forests, linked to conservation projects. So agroforestry is a huge topic, and Tim Pagella will introduce us to it. But what we really want to focus on today is agroforestry in forested landscapes. How can it help? And then potentially, what are the threats of it? So we have an all-star panel today. We have Dr. Tim Pagella from the Landscape Alliance, formerly C4ECRAF. He'll tell us all about that rebranding. He's going to get us just started on understanding what is agroforestry and what do we mean by it and why is it becoming popular. Then we're going to have 2 cases of really interesting projects in Côte d'Ivoire and Uganda, where conservation organizations are working with the communities to introduce agroforestry outside of the forest, and what are the benefits of that. And then we'll move to a big, more global picture of actually when agroforestry is going into the forests and leading to deforestation, from Dr. Sarah Castle from the University of Wisconsin. And then we'll end with Richard Vaca from the Earthworm Foundation, who will give us some practical examples of how they're dealing with these conflicts in the field. So thank you all for coming to our magnificent panel, and I will start with Tim Pagella. You can go to the next slide, Rini. Tim is the thematic lead for agroforestry at uh, formerly C4 eCraft Landscape Alliance. And Tim is going to, yeah, like I said, just get us all on the same page about what is agroforestry, what do we mean by it, how are the different ways it can happen in the field, and why is it a great thing? Why is it becoming so popular? And voila, over to you, Tim. Rini, you can stop sharing. There you go. Thanks.
Okay, hi everybody. Good day. So I'm just to recap very quickly, I'm Tim Bajella. I am currently the thematic lead for agroforestry at the Landscape Alliance, which is, as Charlotte mentioned, the new operating name for C4 Aircraft. It's a brand new branding, so that's the first time I've used it in the wild, as it were. If you've not heard of C4 Aircraft before, we're a research for development organization working across the tropics, basically looking at how trees, forests, and farming systems sort of fit together, working from the plot through landscape up to national land use policy. And with respect to agroforestry, we've probably got 50 years experience. We have got 50 years experience of agroforestry research. Personally, I've got about 25 years of agroforestry research, mainly working in Asia and Africa. So I was asked to provide a very quick definition of agroforestry, and I think the basically it's the deliberate integration of trees into farming systems and vice versa. So farming into forest systems, which we're talking about today. So combining woody perennials with crops and or livestock on the same piece of land. And there really are two forms. There's sort of tree enrichment on existing farming systems, which is where we spend a lot of our time, and the other one is forest systems, where the canopy is acting as a shade structure for crops such as cocoa and coffee, and basically it's a form of forest management. Agroforestry is one of the most common land use patterns on the planet. There's about 1 billion hectares at least. But it gets a little bit harder when we come to looking at what's happening in the margin, not least because much of it is under the canopy, and so we don't really know actually how much is there. Why is agroforestry gaining traction? It's three things, I think. There are more. Trees are multifunctional, but they're particularly good at soil. They're good soil engineers, and increasingly they're important for water and water management. So it's a natural climate adaptation tool. And obviously, as climate variability increases, this is becoming increasingly important. On the other side, it does offer income diversification to farmers, particularly where they are, um, sort of where there are issues around commodities and the volatility of commodities. Just very quickly for today, just it's probably worth just very quickly framing the coffee and cocoa systems. It's $145 billion a year for coffee and about $90 billion a year for cocoa. These are big systems. And for the vast majority of them, I think about three-quarters of coffee and about two-thirds of cocoa are full sun systems. So they're not technically agroforestry at all. So the commodity itself doesn't actually have a huge amount of agroforestry associated with it, but probably a third of cocoa is grown under shade. It's a bit difficult to get those figures accurate. I'd say they're uncertain, and probably a quarter of coffee has some form of shading, although shading is often not very present. And I guess just to sort of finish off, I it's probably worth noting that these are smallholder systems that are running these. There's about 5 to 6 million smallholders directly producing cocoa, and that goes anywhere between 12 and 25 million farmers doing coffee. Okay, these are big systems, and where they are butting up against the forest frontier, these farmers tend to lack full tenure. So a lot of the big decisions around what happens within those systems don't fall, are not within the sort of remit of the smallholder farmers themselves to control. They tend to go up the value chain a little bit, and so I guess just to finish, I think, it's important within this sort of debate. It's to me, it's not whether the farmers themselves are doing the right things. I guess it's really trying to understand what the system is doing, and what the system is actually rewarding around these, certainly these two large commodities.
Great. Thank you so much, Tim. Yeah, Richard will be talking about, yeah, these practice working with small farmers on how do we balance these needs and encourage agroforestry while trying to protect the forest. So thank you for that introduction. You can go to the back now and to the back room, and we will invite to the stage Dr. Ouattara Dujo. Dujo Ouattara, we call him Dr. Dujo. He's from the Swiss Center for Scientific Research in Côte d'Ivoire, and they are actually a grantee of Forest Conservation Fund for the project right on the corner on the border with Ghana in the southeastern corner of Côte d'Ivoire. And so we're working with a large protected area, a community managed protected area, and we're also financing the agroforestry work outside of the protected area. So that's what Dr. Duja will be talking about today. But please, Duja, over to you. Just introduce yourself, maybe explain a little bit about CSRS and the project, and then, yeah, tell us about the impact you're seeing on the forest of these
Thank
agroforestry
you.
programs.
Thank you, Charlotte, and good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, depending on the place where you are. So I'm Dujo Ouattara. I am a researcher, a forest biologist in the Centre de Recherche Scientifique en Côte d'Ivoire, so Swiss Center of Scientific Research in Côte d'Ivoire. So the CSRS is an international research institute uh, working on biodiversity, conservation, sustainable natural resource management, climate change, health, and rural development. And I don't know if you can put my slide, please. We yes. So here you can see this slide. So in the frame of our work on the conservation of the natural resources, we are working with some communities around this forest called FMTE. So it is Tanoe Eni Champs Forest. It is located in the southeast of Côte d'Ivoire, in the border with Ghana. And there, what we are doing is to implement a philosophy, which philosophy is simple. It is that conservation cannot succeed if local communities do not benefit from it. So we are working with 11 villages on the surroundings of this forest. And there, what we are doing is to work with them in order to choose the species that they want. And after that, we are doing the nursery. And after that, we implement the agroforestry system. And this raised some opportunities, some benefit from the local community in terms of income diversification, because as I said, the species are chosen by the local community, and so they know what they want. And also this agroforestry improve the farm productivity because of better soil health and water retention, and also it is expanding micro habitat for some species of the fauna, for example, for birds. And when we are talking with the communities, they show that they are meeting some birds in the field, and in the past time these birds were not encountered in this field. So this is one of the benefits of the agroforestry. And also we currently work with 2,000 farmers in the area. So if you take the planted species, we have 15 species, and we have planted about 4,000 trees in the area today. And yes, something I would like to highlight is that the fact that we have some habitat now in the farm. It makes some conflict between fauna and human because the fauna found their habitat and all the fruit they want in the farm. So we have some problem that we are always manage with the local communities because as I said, we we are working with the communities and in this forest in the past time there are some hunters there and today we have converted these hunters in the surveillance of the forest. So they have integrated the ecological monitoring team and yes, so they are working with us and the benefit is clear in terms of diversification of the income. So yes,
Great.
that's what I would like to say about the Tanoi forest.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dujo. Yeah, some echoes of what Tim was saying, that the improvements in livelihoods and resilience of the farms when you're transitioning these farmers to agroforestry, but also really interesting about extending the habitat, but also maybe potentially introducing some human wildlife conflict. We have one project in Indonesia that we work with that's an orangutan habitat, and they are seeing there's not really enough space forest left for the orangutans, so they're coming onto people's farms, and so actually they're planting fruit trees along the buffer specifically to get the orangutans to stop there. So yeah, really interesting, and maybe Gladys will talk to that too. So thank you very much. We'll now invite Dr. Gladys to the stage. Gladys Kalema from Uganda. Gladys, come join me out here, please. Gladys is the founder of Conservation Through Public Health, a Ugandan NGO doing amazing work with gorillas, especially in the Bwindi Impenetrable Forest, my favorite park name ever. It sounds like a Harry Potter adventure, the Impenetrable Forest. Dr. Gladys, you're on mute, but I just before you tell us all about, maybe you could tell us about your organization and about yourself. But I do want to recognize that the Dr. Gladys and Uganda are right in the middle of an Ebola crisis that's sort of fallen out of the news, but it is definitely still ongoing. So Gladys would love to get an update from you also on that. I think that'd be great for our listeners to hear the impact on gorillas actually of Ebola, because people don't always know about that. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Charlotte, to this wonderful webinar. Yes, I'm here speaking from Uganda. I can't travel anywhere because we have Ebola and nobody wants Ugandans in their countries. Joking. Some countries don't want us because they're very concerned. I would say that the Ebola outbreak stemmed from Democratic Republic of Congo. We have the cases that we have in Uganda are mainly from DRC, apart from Ugandan health workers. And so, of course, it's a little bit of a scare, but the cases are going down. And Bwindi Impenetrable National Park, as you said, it is like a Harry Potter. It's a very beautiful forest, and it's impenetrable. And I hope you visit us one day. It borders the Congo, where all the gorilla habitat is in Uganda, and Bwindi and Mugahinga conservation area. They both border the Congo border, and so do other national parks. So, of course, it's something that we're concerned about because, gorillas can cross and people can cross. But Uganda is helping a lot with the health emergency treatments within DRC to set up emergency treatment centers. So that's improving things on Uganda side and also in DRC side, so people don't have to come to Uganda for treatment. But keep praying for us. Actually, gorillas can get Ebola. They have had Ebola in other countries. Thankfully, not the mountain gorillas where we are. We've had Ebola in Gabon and Republic of Congo. Many gorillas have died of Ebola and people who ate them. That's happened over the space of 30 years. That's why they're still critically endangered, the Western lowland gorillas. But thankfully in Uganda, we haven't had that, but we're working hard at conservation through public health to make sure that people and gorillas don't make each other sick. And so we're working hard with the park staff and the local communities and the tourists even to make sure that everybody's healthy when they visit and get close to the gorillas.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. So Yeah, tell us about your organization and what you guys are doing with the communities on agroforestry. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. Actually, what I've just been talking about is exactly what we do at Conservation Through Public Health. We prevent disease between people and wildlife, gorillas and other wildlife. And this journey began when I worked as the first veterinarian for the Uganda Wildlife Authority. They hired me because they didn't want tourists to make gorillas sick. But actually, the first group of people who made gorillas sick were the local communities, not the tourists. What struck me when I got to Bwindi was a very hard edge between the community and the park. They just said to me, there's the forest. Wow, I was struck at the very hard edge. And because of this hard edge, people are not allowed to enter, but gorillas come out often. So once they lose their fear of people, they come out of the park often to range in areas they used to range before their habitat was cut by people. And so very soon, 1 or 2 years after I started, in fact, that very year that I began, because I first came as a vet student doing research, they said to me the gorillas were losing hair and developing white scaly skin. Turned out that they got scabies from local communities. They touched dirty clothing on scarecrows, which people put out to chase baboons, gorillas, and other wildlife. The gorillas got sick, and because they'd never been exposed, but they're so closely related to humans, we share over 98% genetic material. They got sick, the baby gorilla died, and the others only recovered when we treated them with ivermectin. And so this is typical. The gorillas destroy people's plants. They love the bananas, the moisture in the banana stem, or they eat the fruit itself. And these are the kind of people who live around the park. You know, this photo I took just as I was entering the park. These little boys were herding goats. Yes, they should have been in school. And this is something that happens a lot. So a few years later, we founded Conservation Through Public Health. Next slide. Could you go to the next slide, please? To improve the health of the people and the animals together. We found out that you couldn't really, now, previous slide, please. We found out that you couldn't really protect the people without improving the health of their human neighbors. And I'd already mentioned the steep slopes. I mean, the hard edge. It's actually very, very steep slopes over here. And owing to successful conservation efforts, improved veterinary care, improved community engagement, money from tourism goes to the communities. The numbers of mountain gorillas are growing. The threats have reduced significantly. And in 2018, even if there are just over 1,000 left in the whole world, they were moved from critically endangered to endangered. But because the numbers are growing, the space isn't growing. And this is what you face, steep slopes where people are cultivating right up to the edge. And so we started to think, why don't we start to help the local communities in other ways? We're improving their health, working with community health workers, teaching them to do conservation work and linking them to the local hospitals. Why don't we also improve their livelihoods? And so we started Gorilla Conservation Coffee. Next slide, please. This is actually an idea that came up. My husband's a founder member of CTPH, and he said to me that why don't we start a global coffee brand to save gorillas through coffee? So we did. A lot of tourists had never seen a coffee tree, so it was so easier to create that kind of brand. The tourists who come become the customers later and convince others to buy the coffee. And whenever you're going to visit the gorillas, you cross coffee farms, and we realized that the farmers weren't getting a fair market or a steady price and were still entering the forest to poach and cut trees. So we started to work with the farmers around the park. We give them, next slide, please. We give them a good price for good coffee. And lots of these farmers really like to enter the park because they don't have any other alternative. They're not part of the tourism industry. Not everyone can be a ranger or a porter who carries your luggage to the gorillas or sells crafts or accommodation. And they were missing out on the tourism. So we started to engage them. Next slide, please. Yes, and so we basically offer something. We thought, let's have a solution. You can engage farmers, but if you don't have a market for their coffee, they might give up farming coffee and change their farms into some other better land use. And so we found out that people really want to get traceable products. They want to know who produced this coffee. So we provide that, and the coffee is very good quality. We work with agronomists. It was the top 30 among the top 30 coffees in California in Coffee Review in 2018. So it's high altitude Arabica coffee, very delicious, earning 92 points. It was among the top 30 coffees in the whole world. And through this, a donation from every bag sold goes to support the local communities. And so it supports community health, guerrilla health, and conservation education within the same communities. And people are really proud to be associated with guerrilla conservation coffee. We tell them it's not just about the coffee, but it's about the conservation.
Mhm.
It brings them a lot of pride. Next slide, please.
Wonderful.
So we started off with 75 farmers. Now we have 630. Only 5 were women, and now 230 are women, which we're very proud about because a lot of women don't own land. Some of them are widows, and others, their husbands let them have their own farms, which is wonderful. And we're able to sell it in Uganda, at the lodges, at the airports. Many tourists want to buy coffee from people they meet as they're going to the gorillas, which makes it even better. Next slide, please. This is the airport.
Yeah,
And
these are
we're selling
great.
it
This
in
is where you can buy it. Okay.
Uganda, Kenya, America, Australia, UK. We're also selling it in New Zealand. So wherever you are, you can help the gorillas by buying this coffee. Next slide, please. And so this is our tagline, saving gorillas one sip at a time. And what we do with the coffee farmers is we get them to plant shade trees in their farms, and the shade trees provide a better yield of coffee and a better quality, a better cup quality, which then results in a higher pay for their coffee. And so the agroforestry is really helping to make it a sustainable conservation business and a sustainable conservation solution for the people and the gorillas and the forest.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. What a beautiful example. And I heard echoes of what Dujo said about, conservation can't be successful if the community doesn't benefit from it. So getting them more income, more resilient farms, getting them involved in the conservation project, this is a great way to do it. So thank you for that example. You can go back to the backstage. So we've heard now from some really great success stories about how agroforestry can help local communities get integrated into the project, help them maybe reduce their need to go into the forest and collect firewood. So in the case of Côte d'Ivoire, I know they're planting firewood trees or timber trees so that there's less pressure on the forest. Our project in Peru is working on and alternative proteins, animals, domesticated animals in the system so that they don't hunt as much. So these are some great examples of how agroforestry outside the forest can really benefit the conservation project. And now we wanted to turn to maybe a different side of the story, which is about for these cash crops maybe going into the understory. So agroforestry coming into the forest as opposed to coming onto the farm. And we're turning to Dr. Sarah Castle from the University of Wisconsin at Madison, who's specializes in seeing things from the sky. Especially, she's an agroforestry lover and an agroforestry specialist, but she's also really expertise in satellite image analysis and global trends. And so she's going to tell us about maybe the other side of the story from more of a global picture, and also about how hard it is to detect this from space also. So the challenge is ahead of us. So over to you, Sarah. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Charlotte. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. And I'm super excited to be here with such an amazing panel. And I'm so excited about the conversation that we've been hearing so far. So as Charlotte mentioned, I am Sarah Castle. I'm an assistant professor in the Forest and Wildlife Ecology Department at University of Wisconsin-Madison. And for nearly a decade, I've studied agroforestry systems and their social, ecological, and economic impacts, both in temperate and tropical contexts. And my work dominantly focuses on helping policymakers and practitioners navigate trade-offs among conservation and livelihood goals. So I'm here to talk about the implications of planting commodity crops in the understory of natural forests. So I'll focus on coffee and cocoa systems and share how I think about agroforestry transitions. And I'll put on my researcher cap and talk about some research findings on these systems from scholars across the world to frame the science behind my views. Next slide, please. So to kind of frame this part of the discussion, when we talk about tropical deforestation, a major driver is commodity production, about 128 million hectares lost over the last 2 decades. And coffee and cocoa together account for roughly 3% or so of these global commodity-driven deforestation effects, affecting approximately 4 million hectares over those last 2 decades. And these crops are currently cultivated on over 21 million hectares globally, and a substantial share of which is cultivated by smallholder farmers, as Tim mentioned, under shade within agroforestry systems. Approximately a quarter to half of these systems are estimated to be in agroforestry, though those estimates widely, as I'll explain to some degree why on the next slide, please. So one of the main challenges in reducing commodity-driven deforestation, especially when thinking about kind of big policy drivers like the EU deforestation regulation, is that especially with agroforestry systems, they're not easy to track and monitor. So coffee and cocoa are often grown underneath a forest canopy, as other speakers have already shared, which means these systems and the associated forest degradation can be difficult to detect using standard satellite imagery. So just to kind of visualize this, here we're looking at the Cocoa Research Institute of Ghana, where we can see trials across a gradient of canopy cover. And I'm showing this to highlight that below canopy coffee and cocoa production is really easy to detect using only optical, albeit very high resolution remote sensing imagery. If you focus on kind of the center portion of the slide where you see higher canopy cover trials. Next slide, please. Next, yes, great. New approaches are improving this, though. For example, combining hyperspectral imagery with radar or LiDAR can better detect changes in forest structure, and there are numerous researchers who are working on improving those methods. But even with these tools, it remains really difficult to distinguish between intact forests, degraded forests, and agroforestry systems of varying complexity. And existing forest change maps that are often plugged into monitoring protocols have really high errors in detecting these systems, as you can probably understand from seeing this example. So while measurement is improving, it's still imperfect, which limits our ability to track these commodities for the EU deforestation regulation, among other international policy mechanisms. Next slide, please. So for me to start the discussion about agroforestry as an opportunity or a threat, I think it's important to think across the gradient of possibilities from full set systems to agroforestry with increasing complexity. And I just want to show these examples so that everyone in this webinar has a chance to kind of visualize what these systems might look like. These types of agroforestry systems not only have very different implications for biodiversity and ecological outcomes, as I'll show in a moment, it is critical to take the pathways to these systems into consideration. What is agroforestry replacing? And then what are the limits of tracking these varying activities? And what do we care about in these systems? Next slide, please. So in my view, the question is not whether agroforestry is good or bad, but rather compared to what. So if agroforestry replaces full sun monocultures, it can provide substantial benefits to improving biodiversity, climate resilience, and often more diversified livelihoods. But if agroforestry replaces natural forests, then we may see a very different set of outcomes, such as loss of biodiversity, degradation of ecosystem services, but in many cases, some economic benefit to the local people. So the same land use agroforestry can represent either some form of restoration or degradation, depending entirely on the land use transition and the extent of degradation. Next slide, please. So we can really see this when we look at the trade-offs in more detail. For example, a study of cocoa systems in Ghana shows that outcomes depend heavily on tree canopy cover when compared against monoculture systems. So at moderate levels of shade, around 30% canopy cover, agricultural production remains relatively stable while biodiversity and climate benefits start to increase. But as canopy cover increases further, ecological benefits continue to rise while yields, in many cases, begin to decline due to resource competition. So in many cases, there's a clear production conservation trade-off through a conversion to agroforestry. Last slide, please. However, this really doesn't necessarily capture the full picture of it all. The problem is, to a large extent, which species are conserved or threatened when losing canopy cover. When forests are disturbed by commodity crop plantings, sensitive forest-dependent species are often compromised. So for example, a meta-analysis of bird diversity in cocoa systems shows that, once again, outcomes depend heavily on tree canopy cover. And while bird diversity declined sharply in really low shade cocoa systems with less than 30% canopy cover, in cocoa agroforests with greater than 30% canopy cover, there was with plantings of really diverse and native trees. They retained bird diversity similar to nearby natural forests, but held very different bird communities. So diversity of endemic frugivore and insectivore species declined as canopy covers decreased, whereas diversity of habitat generalists increased. So ultimately, in my view, to start this discussion, agroforestry is not inherently good or bad. The land use transition matters more than the agroforestry label. And ultimately, trade-offs are common when forests are disturbed by commodity crop production, but the degree of disturbance really matters. So policy frameworks ultimately need to differentiate between agroforestry as a restoration activity, transitioning from perhaps monoculture back to greater complexity, versus agroforestry as a driver of degradation to determine unacceptable thresholds to canopy disturbance.
Great. Well, thank you. That's a great framing for where the line should be, and really interesting to see those examples of what we heard in Côte d'Ivoire or maybe in Uganda as well, where bringing agroforestry closer to the forest might, especially for birds, and might be a way to increase the habitat. It's not natural forest, but it certainly has a big biodiversity benefit. So really great to see those examples. Okay, we turn now to our only, well, except for me, Richard Vaca, our only non-PhD on the panel. But Richard is a practitioner. Richard is the director for Latin America for Earthworm Foundation, who is hosting this webinar for us. Thank you again. And Richard is working, really on the frontiers with smallholders in forested landscapes to try to answer these questions of when is agroforestry helping, and what how can we avoid deforestation linked with these commodities? So Richard, over to you. Tell us a little about Earthworm and what you guys are working on and some of the lessons you're learning. You're on mute. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. Today, I feel like a doctor, Charlotte. So I am Richard Vaca. I am forestry, working 10 years in Agroforestry Foundation. Currently, I am the regional director for Latin America, so I work close of the team that are in Brazil, in Ecuador, in Peru, in Mexico, and Guatemala. This country we have office. And Agroforestry Foundation is a Swiss nonprofit organization. And we are guided by the idea that the responsible sourcing supply chain, this responsible supply chain can drive both ecosystem health and human well-being. So we work with company, farmers, and other partners to build deforestation-free and resilient supply chain. Talking about territories in Latin America, we focus on 3 landscapes that have relationship with the topic of this webinar, the agroforestry system and their connection to biodiversity conservation. One of them is in Tomeaçu, Pará, Brazil. The another is in Cayali, San Martin, Peru, both in the Amazon. And the third is in Chiapas, Mexico. These landscapes share a common characteristic. They have many areas with already converted to agriculture. So the percentage of agricultural production area is usually bigger than the percentage of forest or other natural ecosystem. Thus, natural ecosystem exists within the landscape, but mainly in surrounding areas. So from an environmental or ecological perspective, our landscape strategy include conservation or no deforestation component, restoration strategy, and regenerative agricultural production strategy. In this context, agroforestry system become an important component of our strategy. The goal, of course, of our agroforestry company is to increase resilience of the farmer and the farms, but also to strengthen the resilience of the supply chain, while contributing to the ecosystem conservation strategy at the landscape level, and to climate change mitigation and adaptation. So we work with company, farmers, and other partners to promote regenerative agricultural practice in existing monocultures and agroforestry system in crops renewal or recovery of degraded areas. Of course, deforestation to establish agroforestry system is not considered in our projects. So the question is, how do we incentive farmers to protect existing forests? So we are implementing a package that provides support for farmers who agree to conserve the forest for them to transition their farm to regenerative agriculture and agroforestry. This helps the resilience and also benefit to the standing forest. Based on this experience, I will share some reflection, 5 reflections. One, very quickly, to promote agroforestry system, we use the knowledge of entities with prior experience, or we use the lesson learned that have in the territory. There are many. The second reflection is we have supported some agroforestry system model design processes, highlighting the importance of doing so in a participatory way with the farmers, combined with the knowledge of agronomics specialists who analyze, for example, the viability of potential species combination. Also, we need to use the business knowledge to design the models, and of course, the ecological knowledge, mainly for staff that have a more ecological focus, which I will talk about later. The third reflection is about planning. The agroforestry system planning. We consider 2 levels in this process. The first level is the planning at the landscape level, using land use and conservation planning tools. Different methods can be applied. We have mainly used the high conservation value and high carbon stock maps. Talking specifically for agroforestry system at the landscape level, this map help to identify priority areas for the implementation, such as slope or buffer zone or buffer zone of protected areas, or biological corridors, which in a high agricultural landscape are important for connect protected area or important patches of forest. The second level to plan the agroforestry system program is at farm level. We use a tool we call the holistic farm plan. Together with the farmers, we map the spatial layout of the farm, so we identify the productive, the conservation, and restoration zone in the farm. In this process, we integrate the landscape level planning information. The design of the farm plan is a process of dialogue, awareness, and negotiation with the farmer. For example, if a farmer have a farm with 50 hectares and half is forest and another half is agricultural land, it's very possible that they plant to the forest at some point because they need for space to cultivate. So how do we convince them not to deforest? Dialogue is key, and solution, of course. And a well-managed agroforestry system can be an option to improve income and build resilience. But sometimes this is not enough, and additional monetary incentives for forest conservation are necessary. So having a package of response of their concern or needs facilitate this conversation and agreement with the farmers.
Okay.
The
last one.
reflection, the last one, Charlotte, sorry, is about the riparian zone along the rivers or lakes. By law, these areas should have protected vegetation. However, in this territory, this vegetation is often absent. Restoration strategies are very important, but restoring original vegetation is not always feasible, especially for smallholders. In such case, the agroforestry system are a good alternative. Therefore, it's advisable to have different agroforestry system models or design, some with a more ecological focus and other with more economical focus, including a space that generate more income without losing the holistic concept or agroforestry system. In conclusion, Charlotte, we are convinced of the economical, environmental, and social benefits of the agroforestry system. That is why, together with farmers, we are promoting today an agroforestry system program in Latam with a supply chain traditionally focused in monoculture, the palm oil supply chain. It's a beautiful challenge, but we have a successful experience in Brazil that is helping to change paradigm among palm oil companies and farmers. So agroforestry system is challenge or opportunity. We believe it's a very good opportunity if properly planned. It means in the correct place, with the correct model or design in a correct process. Thank you, Charlotte.
Wonderful. Thank you, Richard. Yeah, really great examples of using land use planning to prioritize where agroforestry needs to really be introduced and also create the incentives for farmers making those decisions to protect the forest that they have on their farm. So thank you for that. I'll invite all the panelists back. We have some time for questions. And I wanted to, so yeah, everyone back in the room, please. Thank you. And I wanted to start with Dr. Gladys, just thinking about this idea of farms coming into the forests, maybe more permanent agriculture. So we're seeing, for instance, in Cameroon, cacao, very high price of cacao. Now more and more cocoa being planted in the canopy and yeah, really dense rainforest. What do you think the impacts of that might be, just in a few words?
Yeah, it's a very delicate balance with agroforestry, and I would say that when too many crops are planted in the forest, especially when you have wildlife that will want to eat them or get in touch with them, then that becomes a big issue. There is the potential for zoonotic disease spread because people come in, they may not, if they want to go to the bathroom, they may not bury their fecal matter. So there's a lot of education needed to try and bring people inside the forests where all this wildlife is. Actually, not only the great apes, but all other wildlife can get exposed or give diseases to people. Another big problem is poaching. It's quite, when there's no one around, it's easier to catch an animal, whether it's an antelope, a duiker, or bush pig, or in areas where they eat primates, they could also eat primates when nobody's looking. So the poaching potential goes up, and so does the zoonotic potential. And so it's a very delicate balance. It needs to be well managed and well controlled.
Yeah, thank you. So, Tim, maybe we'll start with you since you went first and you were listening to everyone. Do you have anything you wanted to share after hearing everybody?
I could probably go on for 20 minutes. So you might have to break me in.
You have 2 minutes.
Okay. Well, I mean, all right. I think there's a lot to be thinking about. I guess from my point of view, pristine forests are very hard to maintain in complex socio-ecological systems, and I think we need to understand the size of the communities working in and around these forested areas, and they're substantial. And the cocoa sector itself employs a huge number of people. Dujo may correct me, but I think it's something like 2/3 of the population of Côte d'Ivoire are involved in cocoa and the cocoa value chain. These are behemoths in terms of how they work and the level of dependence people have on those systems. I think within these complex socio-ecological systems that management of the forest is viable and can be done well or can be done badly. I think, as sort of Jack Putz, a sort of fairly famous forest ecologist, sort of noticed, it's a false dichotomy between protected versus degraded. And I think agroforestry, as Sarah was saying, agroforestry can sit at the sort of more benign end where we have complex multi-strata agroforestry systems, or it can sit at the other end. At present, certainly from the African perspective in Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana, most of the cocoa systems are, minimal shade systems. They're not reaching anywhere near that 30% point that Sarah mentioned. They're much simpler than that. We have done our own research on this, demonstrating that even for, full sun systems, the incidence of disease increases where there is no shade present for the cocoa. So there is some push now to start, there's proper evidence to help restore agroforestry systems, I think, cocoa-based agroforestry systems, but they're still going to be a long way off that, those dense, pristine forest systems. I guess, I loved hearing Richard talking about local knowledge and about landscapes, and that's a major focus for us at the Landscape Alliance. But landscapes they're an emergent property of over 100 years of management. And when we're looking at these, the forest frontier, and I think, again, picking up on what Sarah was saying, these are dynamic systems. You often have migrant communities coming in and working in and around the forest areas. So they're not always people who have so they have limited tenure. There are big, significant gender issues. Guys sort of mentioned that, and that those are made, particularly for women who do not own land. You need to own land to be able to gain the benefits from agroforestry in most cases. So insecure tenure creates problems straight away. But these are dynamic systems, and so I think, just to pick up on Sarah's last point, it's very hard when you're looking at it from space to understand whether that system is restoring or degrading in actual fact. And so again, these, being able to track the dynamics of what's happening is really challenging. Agroforestry is an umbrella term. There's lots of bad agroforestry out there, and there's lots of good agroforestry out there. So I think we really need to, to me, management is a measurement. We do need to get on top of that. Is that enough to start with, Charlotte?
Yes, great, thank you. Do any of the panelists want to respond to that, or something else that you thought of when someone else was speaking, or you wish you had said? Okay. If not, we can go to some of the questions. I don't know if you guys were following in the chat. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Dr. Gladys.
Just to mention, and somebody brought it up when I spoke, that it helps to reduce human-wildlife conflict even outside the parks, because some of it helps to create a buffer zone outside the protected areas to reduce on human-wildlife conflict. Like tea is a big one around our area, but also coffee can, to a certain extent, help to create a buffer zone as well.
Yeah, Sarah.
I'll also pick up on what Richard said. I think proposing system designs that work for multiple objectives and making sure the objectives align with community needs and ecological needs and placing them in the right locations is one of the most critical ways of thinking about agroforestry, and fills a kind of knowledge gap. Like if people don't have the tools and knowledge to know which designs work in which cases, that provides a barrier to actually implementing those best practices. So I think the stories that Richard shared was a really good example of identifying those needs and those ecological and economic opportunities with agroforestry.
No, certainly. I was in touch with a colleague from Belize who's working, and there was actually one benefit that I didn't hear, maybe because in the context you guys are working with, this isn't as big of an issue, but certainly in Belize, it's that hard edge that Gladys was describing where the farms stop and the forest starts, and they're very intensive farms that use a lot of chemicals. And so one of the benefits of transitioning to agroforestry is actually fewer chemicals in the water, in the soil, affecting the wildlife too. And this is Heron Moreno from the CSFI in Northeastern Belize. He was echoing what Richard said and what you were just saying, Sarah, about how if it's not a slippery slope, if this is all done in proper land use planning way and mapping out all the actors' interests and really aligning the smallholders' interests with conservation interests. But the problem is that it doesn't usually happen that way. So that's why this has been really helpful for us to understand the potential threats of planting in the understory, and then also these amazing benefits that we're seeing. We have maybe one more minute. I don't know. Dujo, did you want to add anything or respond to any of the questions?
Yes. I would like just to highlight the fact that we need to build some technical protocol, because for example, in the area of FMT where we are working today, cocoa is replaced by rubber and oil palm. So we need some protocol, because it is not the same protocol to do agroforestry in cocoa farms and in oil palm or in rubber palm. So we need some scientific knowledge there, and we are trying to see how farmers can adopt whether the what we call land sparing or land sharing approaches. So I would just like to highlight this case to say that we need to build some scientific knowledge in some crops, some cultures. Thank you.
Yeah. And Richard, the example that you gave of the safdende in Brazil does integrate many, many crops in one system, including palm and cacao. I'm not sure about rubber, right?
I am not sure, Robert. I think there are another type of principally tree that have oil, natural oils, and have the acai. Rubber with palm oil, I think not, but rubber, there are another type of model of agroforestry systems. Yeah.
Mhm. Great. Well, we got lots of great questions in the chat. We'll do our best to answer. Yeah, maybe we'll send out a follow-up document, try to get some answers from our panelists. But we're coming up at the end of the time. So Vanessa is going to post in the chat. If you guys want to, we'll send out a recording of the webinar, but if you want to hear about our next event, and we have a newsletter where we'll be analyzing, summarizing what we learned today and some analysis, and also on our LinkedIn pages. We also have Facebook and Instagram, so please follow us there. We don't do analysis, we just post nice pictures of wildlife and people from our projects, but it's a good pick-me-up feed if you want to. And thank you all so much. I learned so much, and my brain is just spinning, and I think for our audience as well, I can see from the comments. So thank you all very much for being here and all the incredible work you're doing. And have a great day, everybody.